Greetings, everyone, and welcome to SpaceWeek Live, episode 139 on this November 13th, 2022, Sunday, if you're not already aware. So we had a pretty eventful week last week and a big week coming up this one, so let's get into it. First of all, if you have any questions, as always, please drop them in the chat. Make sure to tag my name at @rawspace so that we're sure to see them. Otherwise, your question may be missed, and it will be a sad day all around. All right, so last week, I should say... Wow, that's unexpected. Let me fix that. There we go. Last Monday, a Northrop Grumman Antares rocket launched the Cygnus NG-18 SS Sally Ride cargo spacecraft to the ISS.
T-minus 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. We have liftoff. The NG-18 launch vehicle from all flight.
We have liftoff of Northrop Grumman's 18th Commercial Resupply Services mission. The SS Sally Ride has begun its journey to the International Space Station. The first stage is performing normally.
You know, when I streamed it, I had it sort of pics in pics with the live ISS views on the right-hand side and the ISS tracker with the information bar at the top, because YouTube wants me to, quote-unquote, add value to the content in order to stream it. But when I went back and looked for a full-screen version of the launch, neither NASA nor Northrop Grumman seems to have a copy published on their channels. I think the video is still there, but it's no longer visible unless you happen to have the URL, so we'll have to live with the pics in pics. Then it was captured and berthed a couple of days later. It was about 23 and a half hours, something like that. So if you're not aware, the Cygnus spacecraft does not have an autonomous docking capability, and it has to be captured or grappled by the Canadarm2, the Space Station Robotic Arm, or remote manipulator system.
Good morning, this is Mission
And
Houston.
the arm then moves it to one of the berthing ports, that's BERTH, berthing, similar to a ship, like a sailing ship, that has to be pushed into position by a tugboat rather than docking itself on its own power. On Thursday, a ULA Atlas V launched from Vandenberg with the Joint Polar Satellite System 2, as well as the lofted inflatable deorbit test article. There's an interesting view of some of the materials on the tower getting shredded there. If we rewind this a bit, at the top of the tower, the exhaust from the rockets shredding some material up there. Now, lofted is a very interesting device. It's an inflatable heat shield, basically, and we can see here lofted is inflating prior to re-entry. This is a short time after launch. So there's lofted inflated, and in a moment it will separate. So we can tell that the spacecraft that it separated from, wow, that was interesting. Okay. So it was rotating, but it stopped rotating immediately after separation. And now lofted is... and here we have the splashdown about 111 minutes after launch. So the inflatable heat shield was successful. Can kind of see it, not really. Squinting really hard. And it appears to have splashed down. Safe and sound. So congratulations to the lofted team. On Friday, a Long March 7, I misspelled it in my notes as Long Marcy 7, launched the Tianzhu 5 cargo mission to the Chinese space station from Wenchang Island in the south of China.
10、9、8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1，点火，点火。起飞，70，幺洞10，洞3分，12秒，3拐4毫秒。幺洞10，洞3分，12秒，3拐4毫秒。
There it goes on its way to the space station.
And the next step will be the pitch over, which means that it changes its flight direction from a vertical one to the...
So the coverage of that launch was provided courtesy of CGTN, an official news agency out of China. And the coverage was actually very good. They were kind enough to provide English language commentation, and it was technical in nature rather than the subjective, touchy-feely commentary that we sometimes get from some launch providers, but yeah, it was good stuff, and looked similar to a Soyuz in its thrust pattern with those 4 strap-on boosters. And if we fast forward a bit here, we got a great view of the booster separation.
And also the telemetry. Okay, great.
The boosters are being jettisoned now.
Very good, great view. And the 2 rocket engines.
So I'm not sure what they would call that. Probably not a Korolev cross, but
we can see the
stage separation.
And the interstage.
I was going to ask you what that.
And here we have a view of the spacecraft separation.
Very beautiful view from the rocket.
So the spaceship is now on its own.
Yeah.
So congratulations to the Chinese Space Agency. And last but not least, yesterday, SpaceX launched the Galaxy 31 and 32 geostationary comsats for Intelsat from Cape Canaveral.
15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Intelsat Galaxy 31 and 32. Go Falcon 9. Vehicles pitching downrange. M1D chamber pressure nominal.
So unlike most Falcon 9 launches, this one actually did not have a booster landing because they launched the satellites into a very high orbit, and they needed the extra thrust from the first stage booster, so that would not have left it with enough for landing. So they did not attempt to land the booster, and in fact, if we go back to let's see, somewhere back here, they showed.
And we've also begun to tilt the engines. That's called gimbaling, and that's why we've begun to move horizontally away from the launch pad. That maneuver is called a gravity run, as it's
well, somewhere back there they showed that the first stage booster did not have landing legs, because why put landing legs on it? You know, why waste the legs when the booster stage is going to be expended? So they took the legs off of a pre-flown booster, and we'll put them on a future booster. Replaceable parts. And here is the first of the 2 spacecraft separations. Sped up a bit.
and there is successful separation of the Galaxy 32 satellite.
Because deployments tend to be rather slow-paced. And the second satellite is that cube you see in the foreground right in front of the camera. Oh, there we go. Now, that does it for last week. Now, taking a look further back into the annals of space history, this Saturday, November 19th, will mark the 63rd anniversary of the Apollo 12 moon landing, humanity's second trip to the surface of another world. Astronauts Pete Conrad, Richard Gordon, and Alan Bean launched in their Saturn V rocket on November 14th at 11:22 a.m. local time. 36.5 seconds after liftoff, though, the rocket was struck by lightning, an unprecedented event in Apollo history. This knocked out all 3 fuel cells, leaving the vehicle powered only by its batteries, which couldn't supply enough current for all of the Saturn V systems. They were struck by lightning again at 52 seconds, which took out the 8-ball attitude indicator and garbled the telemetry being radioed back to mission control. At the time, the astronauts were looking at a bunch of warning and caution lights, but at the time they had no idea what happened. The Saturn V's instrument unit guidance system was unaffected, though, and the rocket kept ascending on trajectory. Back in mission control, the electrical, environmental, and consumables manager, John Aaron, remembered the telemetry failure pattern from an earlier test and instructed the crew to set SCE to aux, meaning switch the signal controlling electronics to a backup power supply. Almost nobody knew about that switch, except for Alan Bean, who flipped it, fixing the telemetry stream and saving the mission. Mission Control was also concerned that the lightning strikes might have damaged the explosive bolts that opened the command module's parachute compartment. They decided not to tell the astronauts about this concern for the remainder of the mission, since there was nothing that could be done about it. Even if they were to abort on ascent, if those bolts failed, the astronauts would perish anyway. So they simply didn't tell them. Why give them an extra thing to worry about? Now the crew orbited Earth for a couple of hours, executed the translunar injection burn, and 3.5 days later were orbiting the Moon. They touched down on November 19th and spent almost 32 hours on the surface, 7 hours 45 minutes of which they were outside the lander doing EVAs and collecting 75 pounds of moon rocks. This was much longer than Apollo 11's 2.5-hour EVA. The return trip took another 4 days, and they splashed down on November 24th. The parachute compartment's explosive bolts did work perfectly, much to everyone's relief. Now, looking ahead to this week, it is going to be a doozy. So I'm going to play this by ear here, because I don't have this scripted, but I've got all the stuff on the screen. So tomorrow, Monday, November 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC, we're anticipating, at long last, the test launch of ABL Space's RS-1 rocket. This is a test flight that'll be lifting off from the Pacific Spaceport Complex on Kodiak Island in Alaska. Now, this has been delayed a couple of times over the past couple of months, and I do not know if there will be live coverage. If there's live coverage, I will try to bring it to you, but barring any additional delays, you can look forward to that tomorrow. Later that evening, also on Monday at 8:45 p.m. Eastern, 01:45 UTC, on the 15th, is a Long March 4C launch with the Yaogan 3403 satellite. No live coverage is expected for the Chinese launch. Then on Tuesday, November 15th, starting at 6:30 a.m., is coverage of the U.S. Spacewalk 81 to install a new ISS rollout solar array on the space station. Spacewalkers will be Josh Casada and Frank Rubio. Spacewalk is expected to begin at about 90 minutes after the broadcast starts, so at 8 a.m. Eastern, and last about 7 hours. Now, if you're not familiar, the IROSAs, or the ISS Rollout Solar Arrays, are new high-efficiency solar panels that they literally roll out, as opposed to being sort of origami structures. And they go over the top of existing solar panels. So the ISS solar arrays are these long wings that stick out from the space station. The IROSAs are slightly less wide and significantly less long than the existing arrays, and they stick up sort of at an angle, but they supplement the ISS's power by something like 25%, somewhere along, something like that. In any case, also on, well, so, all right, let me rephrase. The big event of the week is the launch of the Space Launch System, or SLS rocket, with Artemis 1, the first moon mission in the Artemis series. First time we have been back to the moon for, well, since 1972. Now, coverage will begin on November 15th, that's Tuesday, at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 20:30 UTC, with fueling coverage. And I'll have, basically what I'll do is I will have a marathon stream for you all the way from the beginning of fueling coverage through launch and beyond, so long as there is coverage from NASA. I will have a copy for you here on Raw Space. So the fueling coverage begins at 3:30 p.m., but then the main broadcast begins on Tuesday, November 15th at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 03:30 UTC on the 16th. That's the launch coverage. The launch itself is scheduled for 3.5 hours later, 10, 11, 12, 2.5 hours later at 1:04 a.m. Eastern on the 16th, 06:04 UTC. Now, there is a 2-hour launch window, and as we've seen from the previous launch attempts and fueling tests, there very well may be delays. There may be hydrogen leakage that they need to deal with, unforeseen issues, and so they have from about 1 a.m. Eastern to about 3 a.m. Eastern to actually conduct the launch. Then at 4 a.m. Eastern, 0900 UTC on the 16th, is the post-launch news conference, and the time on that is subject to change based on when the launch actually happens. Then, probably in a separate stream, on the 16th at 0830 a.m. Eastern, 1330 UTC, is a coverage of the trajectory correction burn for the Orion module, or the Orion spacecraft. And then a short time later, 21 minutes later, is the actual Orion outbound trajectory correction burn. And then an hour after that, 10 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC, is coverage of the Orion first imagery. So big day, and again, barring any additional delays, of which there have been many, we can look forward to the launch of Artemis 1 at 1:04 a.m. Eastern, 06:04 UTC on the 16th. Now, the timing is unfortunate because that is really late at night. I'm in the same time zone as Kennedy Space Center, and this thing could launch as late as 3 in the morning, which hardly anybody in my time zone is going to be awake at that time. And a lot of folks, even on the West Coast, will be asleep by then as well. So, yeah, the timing is unfortunate, especially for such a historic launch. But it is what it is, and the orientation of the moon and the Earth wait for no man. So we'll take what we can get. But Godspeed Artemis 1, and hopefully that goes off without a hitch. Meanwhile, also on Wednesday, November 16th, at 1:35 a.m. Eastern, 06:35 UTC, is the launch of a Chinese Series 1 rocket, that's CERES, or I guess you could say Cirrus 1, with the Jilin 1 high-resolution gobbledygook, an assortment of numbers, satellites 51 through 54, so 4 satellites in the Jilin 1 series. No, and again, for most Chinese launches, no coverage is expected. That evening, November 16th, again, 10:22 p.m. Eastern on the 16th, 03:22 UTC on the 17th, is a Falcon 9 launching out of Vandenberg with another batch of Starlink satellites. The following day, Thursday, November 17th, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern, 1400 UTC, is coverage of a Russian spacewalk, number 55, to prepare a radiator for being moved from the Rassvet module to the Nauka laboratory module, which is the newish module on the Russian side of the space station. And so they will be preparing that radiator to be moved on Thursday. The spacewalk is scheduled to begin about 20 minutes after the coverage starts. And again, the spacewalk will last about 7 hours. And last but not least, debatably, is on Saturday, November 19th at 5:04 p.m. Eastern, 22:04 UTC, is another Falcon 9 launching the Dragon CRS-26 cargo spacecraft to the ISS. Now, the Dragon cargo, the Dragon 2 spacecraft does have autonomous docking capability. So unlike Cygnus, which we just saw, it will be docking itself to a docking port on the space station rather than being grappled by the robotic arm. All right. So that is it for the coming week. I wanted to take a moment to, first of all, thank our channel supporters and also mention, I didn't mention this up front because, I don't know, might be considered bad form, but I wanted to mention that after more than 4 months of being demonetized, I was actually reapproved for monetization by YouTube, which is exciting. And so what that means is that memberships are available, ad revenue is available, and super chats, custom emojis, all the usual perks are available again. So if you're interested in becoming a channel member, once again, that is available to you. Just click the join button and you'll have access to those things depending on the tier of membership that you choose. All right, let me get to your questions. First of all, let's see. Okay. Looks like we don't have our automatic collation bot working for this SpaceWeek. So first of all, Spaceman Elon with some sad news about a relative who passed away. We're very sorry to hear that, and I know how that can be, and it can be devastating. So I'm very sorry to hear that. Thoughts and prayers with you and your family. And if you'll please pardon me, I have to scroll through the chat looking for questions because they weren't auto-collated, aggregated, whatever, collected. Not too many questions. Oh, what was that? Arnaknud. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. And I'll make sure that goes straight to Benu's treat fund. Evgeny, thank you for the kind words. He says, we love your channel. I appreciate it. I try to be useful. Let's see, Evgeny. Now Saturn V still stays the only rocket which goes to the moon. Well, I mean, other missions have gone to the moon, but not with people on them. I mean, we've had orbiters and landers. Humans have had orbiters and landers going to the moon ever since Apollo, but of course, no humans have gone back there. I don't think we've collected any samples from the moon since Apollo, though. So we've collected them from an asteroid and a comet, but not the moon. Okay. Evgeny asking, you believe in successful launch of SLS-2? Yeah, I believe that when it does launch, it will be successful. Obviously, there have been a lot of delays. There have been technical setbacks and leaking issues with hydrogen. Hydrogen is a tricky gas to work with. It's a tiny molecule, and it leaks out of basically everything. And so, yeah. But as far as the rocket itself, I have no doubts that it will do its job just fine, if not economically. Okay, so a little light on the questions, but that's all right. Wait, RA Monster 163. Haha, the subtitles said Super Chads. Sorry. Okay. Lorelei Schmalstig asks, are you doing gift memberships for the holidays? I wasn't aware that gift memberships were a thing. I wouldn't even know how to do that. But something I can look into. But all right. RA Monster again. Here we go with the questions. Didn't a Chinese moonlander return with samples, or did something go wrong with that? Well, the Chinese landed on the moon. They landed a rover on the far side of the moon. I do not recall. Yes, right. I believe they did return samples. I'm a little fuzzy on that, but I think they did return some samples from the moon. So yes, good job, Chinese. But thanks for the reminder too. It's easy to lose details on the Chinese missions because there's not a ton of news coverage of you know, space endeavors from that country. At least not that filter over to this side of the pond. So, all right. So I think that'll wrap it up for this week. Thank you so much for coming, and keep it raw. And until next time, take care.